To qualify as a dark fantasy, a story has to hit a couple of markers. A world of idealism and heroism just isn't it. Instead, this is a genre that thrives in a morally decaying society where there's more gray than black or white. You meet antagonists who you understand and heroes who commit atrocities that may be unforgivable. The supernatural elements of the story embrace a sense of dread, unlike its more lighthearted counterparts such as Ghibli. For example, Cinderella's fairy godmother is high fantasy, while the White Walkers of Game of Thrones are dark fantasy. Dark fantasy throws us into pits where we question morality, struggle to differentiate between right and wrong, sympathize with sinners, become one with tragedy, find happiness in the bittersweet. Some of the channel favorites, such as Berserk and Claymore, are textbook dark fantasies. That's why, in this video, we'll be exploring 10 other anime, this time more modern, which fall under the dark fantasy category, explaining its qualification and why you should watch it. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. Attack on Titan. Attack on Titan is one of the most highly acclaimed anime of all time, having had a fantastic run through its release. The story introduces us to a bleak world on the verge of an apocalypse where humans exist like birds in a cage, ready to be consumed and annihilated by the invincible Titans in the outside world. The only thing that protects humanity are the walls, or its own cage, that is, until the Titans break the walls down. While Attack on Titan is action-packed, its standout feature is its story, which quickly elevates itself from being one of a zombie apocalypse to a politically motivated thriller where the world is trying to cause a global genocide of the people who are biologically built to turn into Titans. And who are these people? The very population within the walls who are dreading every second of their lives, trying not to get eaten by the very thing they turn into. But they're only in this predicament because they've spent centuries tyrannically ruling over the world with this very ability. In fact, we spend the first 3 seasons wondering what lies beyond the walls, where the Titans are coming from, and thinking it'll get far easier for the people within the walls once they take all the Titans down. But soon, we learn that their own people are turned into Titans and sent to terrorize the walls because of sins their people have committed in the past. On reflection, you can tell why the people are going so far. They want to protect their own, and when the protagonist of the show ends up doing everything they feared, it becomes overwhelmingly difficult to pick a side once you've put your bias aside. And yet, humans carry hope. The hope to explore the vast world outside where humans still exist. The hope for a better future with friends and other loved ones. The hope that makes you fall in love. And this is all done in the face of a global genocide caused by our very own main character, Eren, who, after accessing every timeline, has learned that the only reality where his loved ones can find peace and not be killed by the outside world is the one where he causes the rumbling. On the topic of Eren, he proves to be the perfect protagonist of a dark fantasy series, as he's somehow both pure of heart and borderline monstrous in nature. Brutal and violent since his very childhood, Eren drives the story due to his thirst for revenge against the Titans and his desire to annihilate every single one of them. But when he realizes that these monsters he must battle aren't random freaks of nature and that humanity still exists beyond the walls, Eren doesn't feel happy. He feels disappointed, and eventually he finds himself at absolute rock bottom when he has to face the truth of the world and make the biggest of sacrifices. This story also delves into a great deal of gore and body horror, lots of bloodshed, lying body parts, and the like. But its most standout characteristic in terms of visuals is the appearance of the pure, mindless Titans. They look less like monsters and more like humans. And by humans, we don't mean the type of humans drawn in anime, but human. And this creates an uncanny valley effect, making the Titans look even creepier, especially in scenes where an abnormal Titan is moving or standing in an absurd manner. And they only look this way because they were once humans cut from the same DNA code as those living within the walls. The story is full of moral complexities, with characters being tortured on both sides. Everyone is trying their best with the horrible hand that's been dealt to them, and they're all villains in the eyes of each other, trapped in a cycle of hatred that can only be curbed by a global cataclysmic event. As such, the theme of the show being freedom, when true freedom is impossible, proves heartbreaking. Made in Abyss. While cute on the outside, the story of Made in Abyss is far from that. You could say that the story catfishes you by presenting itself as a lighthearted one where children embark upon an innocent adventure to the mystical abyss, which is home to multiple supernatural elements. But the show is full of heart-wrenching moments that make you tear up and panic. In fact, the amount of child abuse in the early episodes is disturbing. For starters, the abyss in itself is no joke. A colossal pit with multiple layers and the remnants of an ancient and advanced civilization, the Abyss has attracted adventurers known as delvers, diving into the pit for artifacts, exploration, and the like. Within the Abyss lies supernatural elements and creatures, some of which can be insanely dangerous. The most intriguing concept about the geography of the Abyss is its alleged curse. While going down from one layer to the next is quite doable, it's the ascent that puts a huge strain on the human body. It starts mellow, but the deeper you dive, the worse the ascent hits you. We see this when, after being infected by the orb piercer in the 4th layer, Reg and Rico ascend to get away. Already poisoned, Rico begins to bleed out all of her orifices due to the strain, while a helpless Reg can do nothing to stop it. Because he's a robotic being, he remains unaffected, unlike Rico. Eventually, we also learn about the story of Nanachi and Midi, who were made to ascend from a deeper layer as part of an experiment that caused Midi to lose her human mind and form completely, and it ended up being one of the most devastating stories within the show. Unlike Attack on Titan, Made in Abyss doesn't deal with convoluting character themes or questionable morals for the protagonists, as they're just kids. In fact, Rico is only in the Abyss to find her mother, a legendary white whistler. Had the characters been more grown up, the show would still classify as a dark fantasy, but their young age makes things all the more grim, as you don't expect regular kids to fight off the dangers of the Abyss. To top that off, no one wants to see a kid bleeding out profusely while another kid desperately tries to curb the situation. Contrast is key. There's also a significant amount of psychological trauma, such as Nanachi, despite loving Midi, having to ask Reg to use his incinerator to kill her because she has none of her humanity left. This was also her wish. In fact, the scene where she transformed into a hollow was an agonizing one, as she screamed in pain while her body contorted from that of a human girl to a mindless blob. The worst part? The blob was immortal, keeping Midi's soul stuck, while Nanachi always had to deal with the constant reminder of his pain. Jujutsu Kaisen. Just because Jujutsu Kaisen is a popular battle shonen in its purest form doesn't mean it doesn't also fall into the dark fantasy category. As we know by now, its first season was its only lighthearted season. In fact, it's crazy how such a depressing show ended up with such a slice of life-like first season. But even then, the world building was always horror-centric, with the central power system being reliant on negative energy and feelings such as cursed energy and curses. This is a power born from the negative emotions of humans, be it hatred, anger, or fear. Curses are the same, manifesting in spaces such as hospitals and schools, where a bunch of humans often experience several difficult emotions at once, giving rise to powerful curses. It has been established with Made in Abyss that contrast is a powerful tool, and Jujutsu Kaisen utilizes the same as well, albeit to a lesser extent. For starters, it has a very upbeat and stereotypically kind protagonist with Yuji Itadori, who doesn't want to kill, but things hit the fan with the arc involving Yuji, Junpei, and Mahito, where Yuji has to witness Junpei get mutilated by Mahito, who has spent the past few days manipulating a troubled Junpei just for the fun of it. And then, once season 2 rolls in, people begin to die one by one, and many of these characters have been prominent central characters never expected to die, such as Nanami, Megumi's sister Sumiki, and eventually Gojo. The storyline involving Sumiki in the Culling Game arc was one of the darkest twists in the show, as Megumi always wanted to save her considering she had been marked. But in the Culling Game arc, it was revealed that she had become a vessel for the reincarnated sorcerer Yoruzu, who had sensed Sukuna within Yuji. The binding vow between Sukuna and Yuji also got activated during the sequence where Yuji had to hand over complete control of his body for 1 minute to Sukuna. During this time, Sukuna hopped vessels from Yuji to Megumi and killed Yoruzu, and with that, Megumi's sister. This broke Megumi from within, which is something Sukuna wanted, as that would weaken his soul and allow Sukuna to take complete control over his vessel. The show also deals with grotesque imagery, such as Mahito's stitched-up body and his transfigured curses, the gross look of Kenjaku's prison realm, Kenjaku's vessel system where he can remove the top of his head from his vessel and reveal the original brain, which has a set of teeth for some reason, the brutal and bloody battle between Gojo and Toji, Maki assassinating her own family, and so on. There's also a level of moral ambiguity in other characters, as seen with Gojo, Maki, and even Nobara, who are on paper good characters who are more than okay with taking lives. In fact, Gojo was willing to let some collateral damage slide in Shibuya, which is what kept him in the fight for a while, but he's also not completely evil, which meant that he would have a threshold and as such would not get the opportunity to exert his true strength. This ultimately resulted in him ending up sealed. Tokyo Ghoul. One of the more popular examples of a mature dark fantasy series is Sui Ishida's Tokyo Ghoul, a story that's better experienced in the manga than the anime. In this world that parallels ours, humans try to coexist with ghouls, but it's not possible as ghouls are powerful, carnivorous, and man-eating creatures who only feed on humans for the most part. On paper, this makes them the villains. However, after the protagonist turns into a ghoul, we see how ghouls can't stomach any food that's not human or coffee. Ken Kaneki even begins to hate his favorite human food, the hamburger. Over time, we experience this world of ghouls where we realize that they're just like humans, only with a different configuration. Mothers sacrifice themselves for their kids pine for their mothers, ghouls fall in love and avenged loved ones. These are all actions we see them take part in, and that really helps to humanize them. But it also makes sense for humans to fear and hunt them down, as the two beings cannot coexist when one is designed to prey on the other. The protagonist has an identity crisis throughout the majority of the story as he struggles with accepting his true nature as a ghoul. It's not until he gets tortured by Jason for 10 straight days that he finally gives in and accepts his new identity, following which he becomes a cannibalistic ghoul and acquires more power as a result. The show also has concepts and arcs where we see a ghoul restaurant where Shu Tsukiyama presents Kaneki as a ghoul-human hybrid to his patrons who want to taste him. We learn about characters being captured and harvested for their abilities, and in one of the most devastating moments, Kaneki's best friend from his time as a human, Hide, sacrifices his flesh for Kaneki's survival. Ultimately, this severs Kaneki's ties from the human world. There are even characters like Juzo Suzuya in the Ghoul Investigation Department who have been kidnapped at a young age and grew up as the pet of the opulent ghoul named Big Madam. Afraid he would hit puberty and stop being pretty like a girl, Big Madam performed a crude castration on him using a hammer. There are brutal deaths throughout the story, that too of gentle and kind characters such as Yoshimura. To top that all off, Tokyo Ghoul Re, we find out that there are powerful people from both factions, namely the ghouls and the investigators, who are controlled by the same unit, that is, the Washu Fam. As a result, this made the feud between humans and ghouls feel meaningless as they were both puppets dancing on the same strings. Everyone suffers, irrespective of who they ally themselves with. Ken Kaneki, who finds himself at the crossroads between being human and ghoul as a hybrid, suffers the most and finds himself trapped in this cycle of cruelty. Chainsaw Man. A story where the power system relies on devils is bound to be a supernatural horror. Every devil is born from something that humans fear, like the Gun Devil, the Eternity Devil, and the Darkness Devil. In terms of gore, the violence is intense, with Denji using chainsaws to rip everyone apart, or Makima as the Control Devil wringing her targets out of their blood. The primary cast are far from heroes. Makima comes to Denji as his savior, but throughout everything, she's manipulating him and using him like her dog. Denji, who's never felt a woman's touch, is naturally going crazy over Makima's control, oblivious to her being the Control Devil. Even after he does find out about this, he can't stop loving her. Morality is a strange concept in Chainsaw Man. While protagonists tend to have a stronger motive, Denji's needs are simple. Having grown up poor, having a contract with the Chainsaw Devil now allows him to make money, so he does what he does for food, basic comfort, and even love. He's hypersexual, but it's not fan servicey. He truly struggles with it and hates how he's driven by perversion. The deaths we see in Chainsaw Man are often messy and out of the blue. Characters that you've just gotten close to end their arcs tragically soon after, as seen with Himeno, and it shows just how cruel and grim this world is. And yet, we've got the protagonist risking his life time and time again just so that he can enjoy the basic comforts of life. There's no glory here, but he eventually reaches a point where he has attained what he wanted, only to not feel anything. His pain and trauma are a lot deeper, as he is emotionally numb. His hypersexuality is a manifestation of that. It doesn't exist just for shock value or fan service. There's no good or evil here. The concept of morality is gray, and frankly speaking, that's what's realistic about it. It somehow presents realism to us within a dark fantasy lens and makes it work. And this really makes you think how morally close regular life is to dark fantasy. We just deal with it without demons to fight in the flesh. But Chainsaw Man cannot work without diving into realism because the series is somewhat Darwinistic in the sense that this is a world where the strongest survive. Being just doesn't get you credit points, but being weak can get you killed or ruined. However, people keep persevering anyways, just for the small joys of life. Parasyte. A classic dark fantasy and seinen to boot, Parasyte introduces us to a high schooler named Shinichi Izumi, who was quite the sensitive guy at first. One day, after parasitic organisms arrive on Earth and take over several humans, Shinichi's parasite fails to get the job done due to him having headphones on. As a result, the creature burrows into his arm and ends up taking over his arm as Migi. This results in the two consciousnesses coexisting in the same body, and they eventually begin to fight other parasites together as they threaten their own survival, especially because Migi had essentially failed to infest his host, which made him a threat in the eyes of other parasitic creatures. In a way, ever since the arrival of these parasitic creatures, the world has changed for the worse. Shinichi used to be a sensitive boy who stood for justice, but his constant contact with Migi began to cause emotional regression within him, making him more and more heartless, which didn't go unnoticed by his girlfriend. Even after the death of a puppy, Shinichi was about to casually dump at his waist, while the normal Shinichi would have given him a burial. Like Tokyo Ghoul, Parasyte 2 addresses the dietary angle where the parasites feed on humans. They don't do it out of malice, but out of natural tendencies. Humans don't fret before killing an ant. Similarly, these alien creatures are far superior to humans, both in intellect and physical prowess. As such, they perceive humans to be livestock and believe in their own continued survival. With Shinichi growing stronger and more like Migi, he too begins to lose the emotional side of his mind and loses his ability to cry. The character Reiko Tomura, however, becomes a catalyst for the parasite evolving, much like the humans did. Having conducted several experiments, including copulation for the sake of human procreation, Reiko becomes a mother but doesn't feel maternal instinct. That changes when she's threatened with having her baby thrown off the balcony by Kuramori, who has previously been hired by her. Unwilling to let the baby die, she killed Kuramori despite having been cold-blooded throughout most of the show. In fact, she sacrifices her life in the end to save her child, evolving and acquiring human emotions despite being a parasite. This moment reminds Shinichi of his mother, prompting him to cry once more. This raises the question if Shinichi's humanity has returned or if Migi has acquired a humanity of his own. Throughout everything, the story is one of survival, where both species are trying to survive in a world where they're not meant to coexist. Devilman Crybaby. This 10-episode anime crafted after Go Nagai's story is one of the bleakest, darkest, and most depressing of its kind. The fantasy is established early on as we learn about our human world having been home to ancient demons during ancient times, and now they hide within humans and show themselves in moments of great depravity and violence. When the genius Ryo reunites with his childhood best friend, Akira Fudo, he gets him to become a vessel for a powerful demon named Amon. But due to the extreme goodness within Akira's heart, Amon isn't able to take over his body completely. Instead, a situation where Akira controls Amon's powers while retaining some devilish traits is created, turning him into the titular Devilman instead of just another devil. While he's still a good person in the textbook sense, he now has a strong desire for sex and violence in a way that a normal human never does, prompting him to often act against Ryo's orders and kill devils just because he craves blood. But the supernatural has already taken over the human world and seems to be causing a collapse of morality. This is made very evident by Miki Makimura's brother becoming a devil, eating a dog, and then his own mother. While consuming his mother, his devil form still sheds tears from its eyes, but it couldn't stop nonetheless. The moral decay could not be attributed to devils alone, as humans, upon learning about the existence of devils, went on a mass murdering spree, killing anyone and everyone regardless of whether they were devils or not due to mass hysteria and paranoia. In fact, that's what got Miki killed, which became the final breaking point for Akira, who had lost everything. There were instances of people being strapped to poles and stoned to death for being devils, even when they weren't. Ultimately, with the insane revelation of Ryo as Satan, the two former best friends engage in an ideological and cosmic war as the ultimate devil fights the Devilman. It's an all-out war between the devils and Devilmen. Being Satan, Ryo obviously ends up winning, and all of humanity is annihilated. In the final scene, we only see Ryo and Akira. Ryo is speaking, philosophizing to his dead friend, but we see that Akira has been killed. His torso split in two thanks to Ryo's final attack. And in this moment, Ryo is devastated over Akira's death, as the only person he ever loved is gone. He didn't even know he could feel an emotion like that, which makes the scene all the more poetic, especially as angels come in to end the earth, giving Devilman Crybaby one of the darkest and greatest endings for a dark fantasy show ever. Dorohedoro. One of MAPPA's most unique adaptations, Dorohedoro is a dark fantasy horror that deals with devils, magic users, and humanoid lizards. It's set in a dystopian underground society that's overrun by filth. Magic users access this world using doors that only they can create and experiment on its populace to strengthen their skills. This has caused several people in the whole to become disfigured, including the protagonist, Kaiman, who is the iconic talking lizard of the show. Meanwhile, on the other side, the sorcerers live in elegance in splendid conditions, unlike the residents of the whole. The contrast between this lawless world and the better world of the magic users is intriguing because the whole is filthy and lawless because of the magic users. Magic, instead of being all sunshine and rainbows, is causing harm by dehumanizing the test subjects of its users. In fact, it's a violation of human rights to randomly experiment on people, but it's being done anyways. A world built on inequality is often characteristic to dark fantasy. This is made more evident by the visual coloration, as the whole is grimy and disgusting, while the world above is advanced, clean, and beautiful. But that doesn't mean everyone living in the whole is textbook good, while the sorcerers are textbook bad. For example, the sorcerer Shin is far from being a bad person. Meanwhile, Kaiman's desire for revenge against whoever turned him into a lizard makes sense, but he goes about the process by brutally murdering sorcerers. He stuffs their heads inside his lizard mouth, which is somehow home to another man. When that man fails to recognize the sorcerer, which signifies that it's not the person who turned Kaiman into a grotesque lizard, Kaiman just kills them instead of letting them go. The show also has a lot of body and biological horror, as seen with zombies, dismemberments, mutations, and ends mushroom magic. Monsters like Kaiman are humanized, whereas humans are demonized within the plot, as we see the monsters being created as a result of their oppression. Kindness and cruelty coexist in both factions, however, which is often a basis across tales of dark fantasy. The magic is far from elegant, with sorcerers acquiring their magic due to making contracts with demons residing in hell. It's not natural. Some could even take a difficult exam and become devils. On the other hand, there exist systems where magic soot was harvested from those with high levels of magical abilities and then sold to others, once again showing how grim this world is. The Promised Neverland. Season 1 of The Promised Neverland is a masterclass in dark fantasy writing. It sets itself up in a secluded, idyllic orphanage, which is, in reality, a livestock farm. Of course, the orphans are unaware of this. The farm is based in the Neverland, or the demon world, where humans and demons used to coexist previously. However, as the Rattree family signed a promise, the two factions began to live separately. At the Gracefield Orphanage, the kids have a great life until the main cast finds out the truth about them not being raised for adoption, but to become high-quality food for powerful demons, explaining why they were treated as well as buffaloes in southern Italy, who are needed for buffalo mozzarella. A plot point that twists something pure always has an enormous impact, which is why extremely abusive mothers, and in this case, orphanage that should take care of kids being borderline demonic, is a theme that works so well within the dark fantasy context. And the fantasy of a safe haven is quickly dismantled within the first episode of the show. The children lose their innocence when they see the lifeless body of their fellow kid, Connie, and their false happiness shatters. This throws the protagonist, Emma, into a role where she has to bear the burden of making decisions where she's responsible for the continued survival of her loved ones, which would be psychologically daunting for anybody, let alone a child. Over time, we're introduced to horrors such as the chess match of Kriegspiel, where the children play against their orphanage mama, Isabella, who's actually responsible for raising them as livestock. The match is intense because it can result in their deaths, as Isabella is allied with the demons, and the kids have to outwit her to win. All in all, it's a story where numbered children raised as livestock in plantations try to reclaim their authority over their lives, a world where they're nothing more than human poultry. Hell's Paradise. Alongside Chainsaw Man and Jujutsu Kaisen, Hell's Paradise is considered to be part of the dark trio of modern shonen, and its dance with dark fantasy is made evident by its name. The story revolves around a ninja on death row known as Gabimaru the Hollow. He finds hope with being pardoned when he learns that if he gets to a mysterious and deadly island known as Kotaku and retrieves the elixir of life, he'll be freed. As such, he sets off on this journey with the executioner Sagiri, but it quickly turns into a game of survival, forcing criminals to work alongside their executioners by setting their differences aside because the paradise-like island is far from what the name promises. It's beautiful in appearance, but hellish in execution. Once again bringing up the contrast that dark fantasy seems to love, and for good reason. It's a place where one has to kill. Its beauty is a farce, and it's quickly discarded in the face of mutilations and other forms of body horror. Nature has been perverted on this island, where flora and fauna are poisonous and lethal. Their attacks are precise, and they can take down humans with ease. To top that off, the island provides everyone with its life force of Tao, which, when mastered, is a huge boost. Failure to do so causes one to get killed or be transformed into a mindless, flower-bearing Tensen. Meanwhile, the central characters, Gabimaru and Sagiri, have their dichotomy. Gabimaru is a criminal who's desensitized to killing, but his goal with finding the elixir is going home to his wife, whom he loves. Meanwhile, Sagiri, who works on the side of the law, is still an executioner, and as such, has blood on her hands. Hell's Paradise seals its spot on the bandwagon of dark fantasy due to its constant involvement with dichotomy, presenting the dangerous as beautiful and its masterful exploration of humanity. Marvelous verdict! What makes the dark fantasy genre so fantastic is its exploration of dark thematic elements. In fact, it emotionally relies on realism while giving us a fantastical world, which causes a bigger impact. This is why themes of maternity are often explored and exploited, because one's connection to their mother is often one of the most impactful elements in their life, be it in a positive or negative way. After all, a certain amount of relatability helps us connect with the source material a bit more. With that, today's video comes to an end. Did you enjoy it? Is there something you would like us to add or point out? Please mention it in the comments and share your thoughts with us. If you really like one of these animes, let us know and we'll try to do more videos on it. Otherwise, you've been a great audience. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.